to get started, one of the first things to do is sort of really think about like besides just wanting to sort of free yourself from this billable hour, what are your reasons for wanting to operate this way, for wanting to have a subscription service? And we'll talk, about the benefits, but like, I think as I've talked to a number of lawyers who are doing this type of practice, all of them came to it with a part, with partially a reason related to like the billable hour didn't work for me for one or another reason, but it was also like I wanted to structure the way I worked with my clients differently. I wanted to create a different type of a relationship with my clients. I wanted to offer a different type of services to which the traditional billable hour, or even flat fee work, was not conducive. So I think that's kind of one of the places to start is like, what's your objective? And let's have it be more than just like, I'm tired of keeping track of my life in 6-minute increments.
Are you dreaming of setting up a legal subscription service for your law firm, where every month clients pay you automatically for no extra work? You'll just sit back and enjoy that passive income. Sadly, it's not going to happen that way, and that's not even why legal subscriptions are great. This week, we're joined by Dan Lear, the head of partnerships and marketing, as well as being the resident legal mind at Gravity Legal. Gravity Legal helps law firms accept both earned and unearned funds. Now, subscriptions can be interesting and effective for you and your firm. It'll take creativity and experimentation, not to mention accepting that you will make mistakes as you build out your subscription offering. But there are many firms that have reaped the rewards from this work. Ultimately, you can redefine your relationship with your clients but better deliver for your clients by adding subscriptions. There's a lot in this interview, so let's get to it. I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing in the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey 5-Star listeners, before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chat bots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-Star. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. This week, I am glad to welcome Dan the Man Lear. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, John, it's great to be with you. Appreciate the invitation.
Of course. We met years ago at some Clio conference or another, and you're always on the cutting edge of what's going on and what lawyers should be thinking about as we build into new practices. You recently brought into the world a long white paper through Gravity Legal on subscription services. And selfishly, I have you here to help me build out what those subscription services should look like. So this is really just
a play for free consulting. All right. Well, I appreciate you now that we're recording, acknowledging that, because now I can't back out. But all right, fine. All right. Tell me about your mother.
So the biggest thorn in my no, but I mean the things and we'll talk more about. It's obviously nice. We get lured. It's not distracted. Lured in with the thought of that monthly recurring revenue. Every month, we're going to have this free pennies from heaven come in, and we won't have to work for it. And that's not actually it. So we're going to be talking all about the good, bad, and the ugly of subscription, because this is something that we can use to ultimately make it easier for ourselves and our clients in delivering services. And since you just wrote this long white paper, who better to talk about client service and client subscriptions than you?
I'll take a stab. I'll do my best.
That's all I can ask. Where should we even start when we think about this?
Well, so I mean, it's really interesting. Kind of as you were opening, I was thinking like I think that one of the reasons that lawyers end up billing by the hour and subsequently hating billing by the hour is because it's a relatively easy business model. You sit down, you bring clients in the door, you keep track of how much work you do, you multiply that by your hourly rate, you send out a bill, easy peasy. And so like I'm sensitive to the fact that like and frankly like that's worked for lawyers for at least this century and for some time before that. So I'm sensitive to the fact that like it's hard to break away from kind of what feels most natural. But I think to get started, one of the first things to do is sort of really think about like besides just wanting to sort of free yourself from this billable hour, what are your reasons for wanting to operate this way, for wanting to have a subscription service? And we'll talk, about the benefits, but like I think as I've talked to a number of lawyers who are doing this type of practice, all of them came to it with a part, with partially a reason related to like the billable hour didn't work for me for one or another reason, but it was also like I wanted to structure the way I worked with my clients differently. I wanted to create a different type of a relationship with my clients. I wanted to offer a different type of services to which the traditional billable hour, even flat fee work, was not conducive. So I think that's kind of one of the places to start is like, what's your objective? And let's have it be more than just like, I'm tired of keeping track of my life in 6-minute increments.
Right. I mean, the reason I went to flat fee billing for most of my practice is I don't want to bill in 6-minute increments. Clients don't see a value in that.
Yep.
They also certainly don't see a value in the mystery bill that shows up whenever you send it out.
Yep.
But I like let's examine the reasons to set this up. And one of them, a different relationship with your clients.
Yep. And I'll just as a note, and not to give a shout out to the podcast that I'm on, Financially Legal, but we had Kim Bennett on the podcast a number of months ago, and she said flat fees are the gateway drug to subscription. So like I do think it is an incremental process, and that type of evolutionary thinking, right, where it's like, okay, I see that this flat fee isn't really working for my clients is the right sort of step in the right direction. But again, yeah, it's there's another kind of evolution or level of thinking that needs to go in to really sort of, I think, build scale and have an effective subscription plan.
Excellent. So what kind of relationships, what do those different relationships end up looking like? What are some of those objectives that the lawyers and also the clients are looking for?
It can be different for every lawyer. I think I would say one big win for both lawyer and client is it creates a more consultative relationship. And this, to be fair, this really depends on how you structure it. But I think by and large, most lawyers would say it creates a more consultative relationship between the lawyer and the client because the client, I mean, again, we talk about this all the time, but the client, it doesn't have that tick tock running in their mind every time they get on the phone with you. They're often, again, depending on how you structure it, more comfortable coming to you with something, a problem, if you will, in embryo before it blows up and before it needs to be remedied. I think there's another fellow that I talked to who's got this interesting, it's really more of kind of an installment payment, but he's thinking about it in some ways in terms of a subscription for litigation. And one of the things that he's found it does is it actually, and again, I don't want to, we can get grandiose and nerdy about access a little bit later, but like it really does enable folks who otherwise couldn't afford to even initiate litigation to do that. And I can talk about how the economics for him work, but that's another way that it changes. I mean, it's a relationship that he honestly probably wouldn't have if not for that sort of the way that he's structured his payments. And then again, finally, I talked with, and I'll just call her out specifically because I think she's been really interesting in talking about it this way. Beth Leibowitz talks about, and she's big on the outside general counsel kind of subscription model, and she's talked about how legal has actually been a growth engine for the companies that she's working with, where she's been able to come in. And she's very, very narrow about the companies that she works with and ensuring that she kind of gets economies of scale across those companies. But she's able to come in and streamline their sales process, streamline their marketing process, streamline the time to close, so that what she's seen, at least with some of her companies, is by coming in and really partnering closely with some of the the sales and marketing folks, instead of legal being like the hurdle or the thing that those folks don't want to, like, I remember when my time incorporated and working with other businesses, they're like, oh no, don't send it to legal. It just slows everything down and makes everything more complex. And instead, like, she really believes, and I talked with her about this. She sort of says, like, I became part of the growth engine for that company. And that's a huge win, right? If you can go back and say, hey, I'm not just a cost center, I'm actually helping you make money faster. That's awesome. So there's a few kind of examples, I think, that speak to the way these relationships can change.
Interesting. And so it's something where we're setting up, the consultative. It means we're, as you said, not billing on a time. So we've got some level of access that's guaranteed to the client. So they know when they've got a question, they can come back and get that answer from us as long as we're within whatever parameters we've set.
Yeah, and again, it all depends on how you structure it, and frankly, like, and we can talk about this too. I think lawyers tend to be relatively uncreative when it comes to the ways that they structure these. Everybody assumes, like, oh well, it'll be so many phone calls a month or unlimited phone calls a month and then the following things, but really it just comes down to what the kind of services you want to deliver, whether or not someone's willing to pay for those. That's crucial too. But it doesn't necessarily have to include those phone calls. It certainly can. And now I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. Your question was about the consultative relationships, right? I've lost
Right.
my. But if you do have those, if you build a certain number of phone calls into your subscription. Oh, that's what I was going to say. If you build a number of phone calls into your subscription every month, or unlimited as some folks do, yeah, that absolutely opens that door. But what I wanted to say was that doesn't have to be a part of your subscription, and that may not be what your clients want. And so part of this exercise, and again, I'm taking you in a little bit of a different direction, but part of this exercise is understanding what is it that my clients need on an ongoing basis and will pay for, and how can I deliver that in a way that works for them, and very importantly, also works for me and my firm.
Right. And as part of this free consulting, I'm really looking to help you make me understand what my options are because I am the lazy lawyer who just thinks it. But no, seriously, one of the things that I've got a few clients who are on subscription,
Okay.
and it's not just the free phone calls with me, but knowing I'm going to be working as an estate planner with my client's financial advisor, their banker, their CPA, and who knows who else on their team. To make it easier for the client, I can have either a 15-minute call with the client where they then have to try and remember what I said and then translate that back to the CPA. Or I can just have a 5-minute phone call with the CPA, and then the two of us can go to the client and say, we think this, and where therefore you should do that. So it's not just the unlimited phone calls with the client, but who in your client's orbit may benefit from interacting with you.
And John, this example we could probably spend like hours on, because this is super interesting. And just to sort of tease out a couple of ideas, this is super fascinating. So one question that brings up for me is, like, I bet that you say you have a few clients on this particular model. I actually bet that type of a relationship may not suit all of your clients, right? So that brings up a few interesting questions. And again, we can chase these down, or I'll just raise them for your audience, and then they can think about them. But one is like, so, like, could you build a whole practice around folks with that narrow of a profile who, because again, not everybody's going to have a CPA, not everybody's going to have a financial planner, but there are certainly some, group. And again, as we even get nerdier about this, right? Like, they probably aren't wealthy enough to have a family office, right? Where those people are all in their employ, but they do have enough resources where it justifies having each of those roles. And more to the point, there's value in having those people talk to each other. So, like, could you build a subscription practice that targets just that audience in specific and offers those particular services in a really compelling way? That's one thought I have. Another one that comes up for me, and again, we can leave it or explore it, but I think it's really interesting when I hear lawyers talk about how they have a few clients on subscription and a few not. I think one of the things that I've discovered is it's a pretty big shift. And again, I'll give you credit because you already made the shift to flat fee. You've already adopted the gateway drug,
It's a good
but
drug.
it can be a pretty big shift to go to subscription. And so one of the things that gets me curious is like, like, how's that? Because I truly do think that with the relationship changing that way, and frankly, it changes to some degree the way you think about how you run your law firm. I think some firms would struggle to switch between subscription and otherwise. So I like, again, your podcast, your interview, not mine, but just to quickly kind of one of the questions that this brings up for me is like, I wonder, whether this subscription is something that he sort of intentionally designed or really kind of happened upon, and how, because I do think sometimes when lawyers roll out subscriptions, if they've not been thoughtful enough about it, there ends up being a real tension. Because if you think about it from an hourly perspective, you might be losing money. But if you think about it with other pieces kind of built in, it makes a ton of sense. So anyway, we don't have to explore that. But one of the questions that rises for me is like, do you feel any tension between offering both this subscription model and this flat fee model, and kind of how do you work that out?
Right. So I would say I would still keep the flat fee as the onboarding membership initiation fee
Interesting.
before you get to the subscription, just because so much of the work and the thinking goes into the initial review of what you've got, that
Mm,
we're going to come in and kind of clean things out, make sure we've swept everything up and put
yeah.
everything in a nice order so that going forward, we at least know what messes we need to deal with, what are we building on,
Yeah.
that it's not, I mean, Jack Newton at this year's ClioCon was saying, well, instead of charging $1,500 for an estate plan, charge $50 a year for 50 years and you'll make more. The problem is, that's a big assumption that you're going to keep those people around. It also misses that most of the work is done in those first few months and not on the ongoing basis. So for me, yes, I mean, I'd love to have everybody ultimately on a subscription, but we have to go through and I don't want somebody coming in for 10 minutes saying, here, we're subscribed, redo all of our documents, and then they're gone 10 minutes later because there's such a big slug of work to do right there at the outset.
Yeah, and again, like many discussions to be had here. Like truly, we could talk about this forever. A couple of thoughts that just came up for me. One observation is I was just talking to a lawyer earlier this week who is kind of doing the flip of you. Now, granted, he's not an estate planning lawyer, but he wants to get them signed up for a low cost subscription and then upsell the flat fee stuff. And not right or wrong one way or the other, but like that's a model. And then in response to your second question, the only thing I'd say is, and again, I think this is where you have to decide what kind of firm you want and how you want to structure your relationships. And again, I think this is where it's very relevant to consider what practice area you're in and whether or not the particular way someone's offering a subscription works for you. But like if I were you, if you really wanted to be a subscription firm, which may not be what you want, I would, I'd test it out. I also remember meeting with a fellow, this is a number of years ago, this was at an estate planning conference, where he told me his pitch to clients is basically like, this is what our estate plans cost. If you can't afford that, we'll come up with a number that you can pay me every month. And like, for some folks, I'm sure he has some lower bound, but he said, I'll bring just about anybody in. And I think it had been a very successful strategy for him. So sorry, I'll just give you one. I was talking about the litigation kind of subscription installment earlier. That was one of his concerns as well. Is like he said, yeah, litigation is very expensive in the first couple months, and that's why we ask for that big retainer, is because we're going to do a bunch of work and then probably sit around. But he said, what I realized is that's a real barrier to bringing people in the door. And so he said, if I can bring that down to a monthly fee that those folks can like reasonably bite off, what I find is A, I get more clients, and B, it usually takes long enough that not only do I make my money back, but I actually make more and it works better for them. So again, it all depends on how you want to weigh all of these different factors, but I would encourage you, to think about it. And again, it really comes down to whether that's the kind of firm you want to have. But anyway.
Right. And sadly, there's no easy answers on this.
Yeah.
What lawyers are going to hate is you have to experiment and you have to be willing to be wrong. Not in the malpractice sense of being wrong, but in the business sense of you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
You might lose a little bit of money.
And here's I remember somebody I knew mentioning, oh, well, we flat feed somebody, our first experiment into it, we lost money. It's like, and we're never doing it again. It's like, well, one, you didn't lose money. Your hourly rate wasn't what you thought it was because that's how you figured it out. You also didn't realize that, of any 10 flat fee clients. 6 of them will be wonderfully easy. 2 of them will be moderately challenging. You'll learn something. And then I've got 2 left. So one will make you pull your hair out, and the last one will make you raise your prices.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what it should be. Like you learn and you tweak and you just keep going. It's okay to not have it be perfect from the outset.
And I'll just say two quick things. I think multiple times in the white paper I said you'll probably lose money because like in getting started, that's what it takes. Oh shoot. And then I forgot what my second piece was going to be. Oh man. Anyway, but I definitely said that in the white paper is like this will not be a profitable venture, most likely, kind of right out of the. Oh, that's what I was going to say. The second thing I was going to say is you don't have to roll it out to every single one of your clients. You can experiment with 2 clients. So that way you're not opening the floodgates to an unending series of calls from clients who, you've offered free phone calls to, right? Like you can test it and tweak and learn as you go forward. So anyway, just 2 quick thoughts on your reacting to your comments.
No, and that's the point is for this to really work, you do have to invest in it and you want to get it to the point where you've got a kind of critical mass of clients. When you've got one client at $50 a month, that's not very much and it doesn't make sense for you. But when you've got 10 clients at $50 a month, that's ultimately $6,000 a year, which is no great shakes, but that's somebody who's making call it $15 an hour, that's 20% of their salary, where all they have to do is handhold whatever that looks like for those 10 clients for 8 of their 40 hours a week. And I'm doing the math in my head, so I'm sure I'm wrong. But even
something
still,
like that, though. Something like that.
It doesn't make sense for somebody to think about it, or you don't get the economy of scale at one client, but when you've got 10, you can start funding and thinking of it as I've got the client service rep who's just there to handle all of my subscription clients.
And that's one just reason, and again, I don't want to keep interrupting you, but that's one reason why I do think this is a mindset shift. It really is a different way of thinking about delivering legal services. And that sounds so grandiose, but I like it is like you're building a scalable platform. You're not billing by the hour. And again, like we can criticize the merits of the billable hour. That's not my point. My point is just it requires thinking about how you deliver those services differently.
Excellent. So we're getting started on this. What would be your thought? Do you start with the higher priced subscription and kind of work down from there? Or would you start with a lower price to test the waters?
And this is like the worst lawyery answer, but like it just depends. One thing I will say is, and this again came up in a conversation. Good friend of mine, I'll give him a shout out as well. Alan Rodriguez from 1-400. He works with a lot of firms who are trying to roll out subscriptions, and he says they often come in with like 4 different. I want 3 different tiers, all priced this way, and he says pick one, right? Pick one and roll that out and see what you can learn from there. So I think it depends on the nature of your clients. Again, it depends on the type of relationships you want to have. Again, contrasting 2 examples of folks that I've talked to, Jonathan Tobin, and again, I mentioned Kim Bennett. John is a very one-to-many subscription plan. He's got a number of small businesses on $100 a month, and then kind of has a different type of relationship than Kim, who has a small number of clients on a larger amount every month. And, she's a little more proprietary about her pricing, but like you get the picture, right? And they both have great relationships with their clients. They actually both serve kind of small businesses and creators, but they do it in a very different way. And it just really comes down to how you want to do it. So I think you want to think about, what kind of a firm, what kind of a relationship, what kind of again, in John's case, even community do I want to begin to build? And again, this is where I think this is really important. Like, what kinds of services are you offering that you like offering, that you feel like you could offer all the time that folks will pay for? And kind of begin, and that third piece again is super important, right? Like you got to make sure that's something people want. But that can begin to define the contours of this relationship.
We just finished up our interview with Guy Sakalakis, and what we kept coming back to was being authentic in your marketing as being one of the most effective ways of marketing. And here we are inside the practice, honoring what you like to do, because then ultimately it's going to be easier for you to sell it and for clients to buy it.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And again, I'm a big fan of understanding your strengths and playing to those strengths. And I also believe pretty firmly in life that where your strengths and your what often happens is there's this kind of reverberating effect where your strengths and your sort of likes overlap. People like to do things that they're good at. People get recognized for doing things that they're good at, and doing things that you're good at feels good. So again, and you've got to find that place where those two overlap with market need. Because again, like if you can't get paid for it, like there's just no point in doing it. But I think that kind of there's a pretty big portion of that concentric circle that overlaps with authenticity 100%.
Excellent. So, and writing the paper, collecting information for this, what surprises did you come across? Things that you really changed your mind about what subscriptions can do or what people can do with them?
Yeah, I think there's two things I'd say. One is I really believe like even in, and you'll see some of these jokes in the white paper, like it's not a great idea for criminal law, but then I've found criminal lawyers who have found a way to make it work. And like it's not a great idea for personal injury. And yet I think again, depending, maybe it's not client side, maybe it's defense side. I don't know, but like depending on the type of client you want to work with and the type of problem you want to solve, I don't want to limit people's creativity. So that's one observation is I think it works in more situations than, I mean, like look at Aaron Levine and Hello Divorce, right? Like there aren't, there are serial divorcees. I don't know that you want to market to them, but she's built a way that people find ongoing value from, what is often a one-time event for folks. So I think it works more than people give it credit for. I think the second thing is kind of what I've been talking about really this whole time is I do think it's harder to shift to that than people think. I think, you hit the nail on the head and we've talked about it. Like people try it once, they get overwhelmed or it doesn't work and they're like, "Oh, I give up." And I really do think that I don't want to say that you have to go all in, but I really do think that you have to kind of let go of thinking about things from an hourly basis and thinking about, hey, I'm building a platform, I'm building an engine, I'm building a scalable skill. And that's very different than I'm increasing my expertise and increasing my rates on an annual basis. And again, you'll find no one who has been more critical of the billable hour than me. But like just looking at them objectively, they work very differently, and that the economies are very different. And so just looking at them objectively, you have to sort of be willing to approach subscriptions differently. And so again, the second thing I'd say is I think it's a little bit harder to make that transition than I might have initially thought.
Well, Dan, I think that's probably a great place for us to close the conversation for now. One, where can we get your white paper on subscription services? And two, where can we find you online?
Love it. So the white paper can be found at www.gravity-legal.com/subscription white paper. Get a free copy there. I blog a lot on our blog and again, mentioned it lightly here, but on our podcast, and that's at gravity-legal.com/financially legal. I spend most of my time, I think most people know me from Twitter. I'm at Right Brain Law, so you can track me down there as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I actually am not on Facebook. So, well, I have a very modest presence, but I don't spend time there.
It's better that way.
But you can find me those places and experimenting with, well, actually, I haven't even logged in yet, but trying to figure out whether I should be on TikTok or not. So maybe I'll join there soon too.
Excellent. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's been great, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.